Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in. Hello.
Hi, man. How's it going?
It's going good, man. Are you feeling a bit better?
Oh, you mean from illness?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just working really hard to turn in this book draft. Just working all day, actually.
Oh, exciting. So you're almost done with it?
Yeah, I'm almost done. I just have about 50 pages left to write, I think.
Cool.
So,
Should we give Econ 102 listeners a high-level preview, or do you prefer to keep it totally secret?
oh yeah, no, a high level preview. Well, so the book is for the Japanese audience first and foremost. It's just about how to revive Japan's economy, and the basic idea is you have to do a when these rich countries stagnate for a while, like you have Japan, you have Italy, like there's a couple others, UK and Germany are like a little bit of that flavor too. You've got to treat yourself as a developing country again, and you've got to think about catch up as economic development. Like Japan's, output per hour is 2/3 of France. Like you can catch up. You're basically a bit of a developing country for a while, and you should catch up. So you should do like multi-strategy development. You should really try like a bunch of different things. And so I think that the strategy that so Japan is basically trying two things. Number one, encourage innovation, entrepreneurship. Everybody loves that. There's like a big startup. They're trying to engineer like a startup boom, and like a bunch of people are interested in it. The other one is kind of reform the big old companies so that they become more efficient and kind of reform themselves. And then those are the sort of the two prongs of the strategy. And I want to add a third one, which is foreign investment. Now they've got and they're kind of doing it, in the semiconductor industry. They're getting a bunch of companies to sort of build fabs there. But I think this is a model for stuff they could do throughout the economy. Use Japan as a production base because now it's cheap. Not just the yen, but like wages have been suppressed for a long time. Wages are cheap, and permitting is super, super easy there, and like infrastructure is great. And like Japan is honestly now a cheap country to make stuff in. Like, given the very high productivity, arguably cheaper than China for a lot of stuff. And so make stuff in Japan. So the thing is that they have no institutional memory of how to really do this because they, during their fast growth period, it was always like, stuff made in Japan by Japanese companies, right? And so now they need to think of foreign companies making stuff in Japan for foreign countries, using Japan as a production base. And this is very antithetical to the old Japanese mindset of how things should be produced, but it's really important because then you get influxes of foreign talent, management ideas, and technologies, physical technologies, and all kinds of stuff, plus capital, right? You get money. And then you get workers, and then you have workers. So what's interesting is the big change in Japan is that workers are starting to circulate. Mid-career hiring is up to like 40%, I think, of hires, which is amazing for a country that used to have like almost no mid-career hiring at all, right? And so people are circulating among companies. And so now that's even more important to get foreign companies in because then they'll circulate around. So a lot of people think this is sort of the secret of Silicon Valley. Secret sauce of Silicon Valley is that people circulate between companies and spread ideas and recombine ideas because California doesn't enforce non-competes. And so yeah, anyway, so basically it's how to get FDI. And the thing is that Japan is the strength of everyone loves Japan. Like everyone, once they like sell their first company in Silicon Valley and like want to start a new company from somewhere in the world remotely, or whatever, they all want to do it in Japan, right? I mean, you met all these people who want to just move to Japan and live in Japan now, right? And so like Japanese people don't understand that that's a real thing. And so I'm trying to basically teach Japanese people, like, everyone loves your country. People want to actually live there and make companies there. And, that's pretty cool. And so the title of the book, the provisional title of the book, has to be negotiated. But the title that the publishers themselves suggested is Weeb Economy.
Oh, interesting. That's a funny name.
Well, Japanese people don't even know the word weeb.
And this goes against, or this is contrary to how people typically think of Japan or Japan's economy.
Well, it's. I think foreigners are starting to get this idea of Japan before Japanese people themselves get it. Like foreigners are starting to think Japan is just a place you can go and plunk yourself down and live and exist. Right? That's now a common thing among like tech people, I think, or people in the know, sort of savvy people in the know. Like your car parts maker from like Indiana doesn't know this yet, right? And maybe your like finance quant from New York knows it, like Quantian knows it, right?
Yeah.
We still need to get Quantian out here because I owe him an expensive dinner on a bet from 2020.
What was the
Which
bet?
I have not yet been able to collect to pay up, and it's kind of annoying me.
What is the bet private?
No. I bet on Bernie. I bet on Bernie to win the thing because I didn't want Bernie to win because I thought Trump would defeat him in 2020, which was probably true. And so
2020 or 2016? Bernie?
2020. I think Bernie would have had a decent shot to beat Trump in 2016, but by 2020 he was out of juice, and basically you needed Biden. And so like Bernie was talking about stuff that like nobody cared about. And so I bet on Bernie to win in order to hedge, because like I didn't want him to win. So I wanted to like, if he won, I wanted to like collect an expensive dinner from Quantian as my like booby prize.
Yeah.
Because bets don't actually reveal beliefs. I actually thought there was less than a 50%. I thought there was like, I don't know, a third of a chance that Bernie would win or something like that. But like bets don't actually reveal beliefs. Like because you have, so that's something that like Brian Kaplan and others need to reckon with. Like,
so you're bearish on prediction markets then, as a way of
prediction markets. I think that like you could
as a way of
use
revealing wisdom
to hedge if you want, but I also think there's a countervailing thing where people use prediction markets to express a belief. So like, right. I think you have like on Predict It specifically, there's like a contingent of pro-Trump people that will periodically just like plunk down a bunch of money on Trump, and it's not a bunch of money for them because they're crypto rich, right? Like these are rich crypto people, but like, so it's not a bunch of money for them, but like they'll plunk stuff down just to like see Trump go up and like see line go up for Trump, like it's, so there's that, but then there's also people who will like bet on a thing that they don't want to happen simply because they're hedging their bet. They're hedging their innate risk, right? Their idiosyncratic risk, we'll say.
Yeah.
And then there's people who just arbitrage. Like I made inflation bets. I found two people willing to give me like opposite odds. Like completely opposite odds, like 2-1 or 1-2. So I just made the opposite bets with both of them and just won.
Yeah, but the theory of prediction markets is that people are betting on things they actually believe will happen, and so you get better data than when people are just don't have skin in the game. But if a lot of people are hedging or just betting on things that they want to happen, then perhaps it's not yielding sort of the wisdom of the crowd, so to speak.
Well, yeah, I don't actually think that the hedging is super commonplace. I think that because I think it's a small enough amount of money where most people don't really think about that. Most people are thinking like, I want to win $100, not like, like $100 will make me feel better if this bad thing happens I don't want.
Right.
But like, if you're a finance theorist, you think in terms of what they call risk neutral probabilities. Like it's the probability modified by like how much you want the thing to happen. Right, like it's not just probability; it's how much you care about the thing happening too.
Yeah.
So I think bets don't necessarily reveal beliefs, but they could. Like right. It just depends. Like if you're betting just for the hell of it, but like also, there's the fun of gambling, right? Yeah. Some people are risk loving over small gambles. Right. Like some people would rather just like, some people would like lose $10 for the opportunity to like, win $1,000. But like they'll do something that will, in almost certainty, lose them. Like lottery ticket is fun for people. Like so, maybe you'll be risk loving over small gambles. You're like, it's $10, man. I know I'm not going to win, but like if I did win, it would be so cool. And just like, so risk preferences are just not what we think they ought to be either. So I think prediction markets are pretty good. Like their record of prediction is decent, but the real problem with prediction markets is they don't contain very much information.
Yep.
So like, oh hi baby, my rabbit is running through the house. Oh hi baby. Yeah, he's just like bounded over to me. Anyway, all right. So anyway, let's get into podcast stuff, man.
Yeah, sure. We were getting on a tangent because you were saying how this is contrary to the traditional view on Japan. And then you went to bet with your friend.
The traditional, I mean, like everyone just thinks about the fast growth period when they think about Japan.
Right.
But the game has changed in Japan. It's a different country than it was before. Japan really does change a lot. Like Japan seems unchanging to people because some things are so different that the differentness makes people think that it's unchanging, but it's actually different in different ways at different times. Like, for example, there's a stereotype that Japan is like very collectivist and conformist, but then, if you gave surveys to people in like the 70s, that's actually what you'd find. But then in the 80s, things flipped, and suddenly Japan became, like, on all those surveys, more individualistic than America. That's like Japanese people will like do their own thing to a greater degree than Americans will, which is not to say they'll always do their own thing, but neither will Americans. Like, so Japan is a less group-oriented society than America, according to surveys like World Value Survey and the other like psychologist surveys. That's just not a thing people think about, right? Like, people have this old idea. They read the chrysanthemum and the sword or whatever, and they think Japan is this very group-oriented society. And, there's still certainly pockets of Japanese society that are very group-oriented, and there's pockets of American society that are very group-oriented. But, like, Japan changes, and I think people don't quite get that.
Right. And say more about the differences between how a developing country and how a developed country should think about growing its economy, because you pointed it out as an important distinction.
Right. So for a developed country at the technological frontier, you need to invent you need to invent new technologies, right? Like, if you're America, you're going to yes, there's a few other things that other countries know that you could like duplicate or like, figure out. So like, China came out with these really long range batteries. Like, we should get those here. But those are few and far between. Primarily, we're going to be inventing new stuff. We're going to be doing research and development. So there's the big truck passing. It's kind of loud. We're going to be doing research and development. We're going to be, pioneering new business models. We're going to be doing startups, stuff like that. Very innovative. When you are a developing country, you can piggyback on what other people have done. You can catch up to the frontier, right? You can license technologies from other places. You can copy technologies, reverse engineer. If you're China, you can even steal. Although when Japan was catching up, they didn't steal. They mostly just bought. They bought technologies, or they just read scientific papers, or they reverse engineered a product. They'd grab a product and pull it apart and see how it worked, and then like, maybe we could build that, right? Stuff's harder to reverse engineer now because it's made at the microscopic level, and it's hard to see like, what the fuck did they do? They doped it with something. Like, if it's like chemical doping, how do you can just do spectroscopy? I don't know. It's harder. It's harder than it used to be. You could just pull apart a transistor radio and be like, what's in here? But now it's harder. Biology is really hard. You don't know how people like build the wall of a jet engine to be so resilient. There's really only two countries in the world that can like build a good jet engine. Those are America and Russia. Like, the Russians figured it out. The Russians are able to build extremely high performance jet engines, and we can do that. And nobody else knows how to do that. Like, Japan does not know how to do that. No one in Japan. And like, the people at Mitsubishi have been trying to crack this for like decades, and they cannot figure out how to build. And that's when we say we build wide body aircraft. What does it mean that America like can build wide body aircraft and other people can't? Like, I guess Germany can also do this. That's the three countries that can do this. And then I guess they give their technology to France for like Airbus. But like, what does it mean that we can build a wide body aircraft? Well, wide body, there's nothing special about a large wide tube of metal. I mean, there's some special things about it to like not break up in flight, but like mostly it's the engines that you build. You have to build a very high performance engine to be able to carry that kind of weight and that kind of size. And we know how to do the metallurgy of that, and other people don't. Actually, we should get Ian Brook. That's who we should get. Ian Brook on the podcast. We should get him, and he'll just talk about jet engines the whole time. That guy's awesome.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so circling back to the developed versus developing.
Oh, yeah. So you have to innovate your own stuff. So Japan can copy other people's stuff now. They're behind enough at this point where they can do a bit of copying. Another thing is that for advanced countries, macro becomes very important, because your like housing busts and your interest rates and your inflation and whatever, these become really central. But for a developing country, macro takes a backseat to micro, because there's so much like stuff that's wrong with the way your country works that by fixing that you can generate growth, like large levels of growth. Right? For a country at the frontier, stopping recessions is like a bigger priority. But for a country that's behind the frontier, like for China, in 1997, they had the Asian financial crisis, right? So this really hit them hard, but China just grew right out of it. They were just like, screw it. We'll just privatize some state-owned companies, clean up the banks, then like do some more like local regional business promotion, and then that's it. That's all they did, right? It's like join the WTO, bam, recession gone, just powered right through it. And then China has much more of a difficulty getting that stuff now. But in Japan, Japan did all it could with macro. Japan used monetary policy to put all the women and old people and young people to work, right? They stimulated demand for employment. And now everybody in Japan just works all the time. Like in the 90s or in the early 2000s, when I first lived in Japan in like 2004 or whatever, like Japanese people, a lot of people were not working, right? Old people weren't working. There were a lot of like people were just housewives. And then a lot of young people would just like work part-time and then do fashion, do art, do their band, and they were living with their parents. Their parents had wealth left over from the bubble years, and they could just live with their parents. And they could just do this, and Japan was still about as rich as the other rich countries then. It hadn't quite fallen behind yet, and like up till like 2007, I'd say, which is when I lived there up till 2007, and then so then there was a lot of just like idle youth, and that's why I love living in Japan, because I would just hang out with these like amateur artists and musicians and fashion people, and these were like the most skilled like amateurs you ever met. They were just fucking brilliant, and I realized at the time, like that, that in terms of economic production, you could call that a waste of talent. Just like you could have in the communist days and, Soviet Union, you'd have people just like sitting there making art because like the communism wouldn't let them do anything useful with their lives. And this is a smaller degree. Like the stupid Japanese system wouldn't let these people do like economically useful things. In America, these people would be like, starting startups and whatever. They'd be doing something very, or working at some more high powered job, or like being an academic or something. But like in Japan, they were just making amateur art. And to some degree, it was a waste, but it was also beautiful. It's pretty cool. And then now everybody works because Abe just, Abe and Kuroda, the governor of the Bank of Japan during Abe's tenure, they just like cut interest rates or did quantitative easing like out the butt. And then they just, everybody went to work. Right, they did the macro. Japan's had no labor productivity growth since 2007. They produced the same amount per hour as in 2007 in aggregate. Their GDP is like only 6.5% higher per capita, and all of that comes from sending more people to work, and all of that is Abe's macro.
Fascinating.
Anyway, I'm just gonna, I'm writing this in my book, so I'm just giving you like preview of the book here.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. As a developer, the journey from concept to production-ready LLM apps is fraught with challenges. Dealing with unpredictable LLM outputs, correctly handling PII, and ballooning API costs can all be blockers to shipping your next AI-powered feature. Weights and Biases Weave is a lightweight AI developer toolkit designed to simplify your LLM app development. With Weave, you can trace and debug input, metadata, and output with just 2 lines of code. Weave helps you run rigorous evaluations and securely manage all of your data sets and system configurations, so you can focus on what matters most, iterating and improving on your LLM-powered applications. Plus, Weave integrates seamlessly with your favorite APIs and libraries, including OpenAI, Anthropic, Mistral AI, Cohere, LangChain, Llama Index, and more. Make real progress on your LLM development and visit wnb.me/cr to get started with Weave today. That's wnb.me/cr.
What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. It's a bull market. It's a bear market. Rates will rise or fall. Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 40,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to your immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/102. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/102. That's netsuite.com/102.
Is there a concern that China in a few decades could turn into Japan or have a similar fate as Japan with the demographic slowdown?
Yeah, well, they're not going to make exactly the same mistakes as Japan because Japan's policy mistakes are different than China's policy. Like, it's not how China operates. But I would say that broadly speaking, there's some similarities that could give them troubles in some broadly similar ways. So like obviously demographics is one, Japan was the fastest, basically had like this insanely rapid aging between the early 2000s and like now. Japan went from, still being like an oldish country, like, but not super annuated. Now, like there's just no young people around. Like you go to Japan, it looks like just it's old people. There's like a couple neighborhoods where young people hang out, but it's just like tourists and old people. It's bleak. And China is headed that way. They're going to really, starting in the 2030s, they're going to really start aging like very rapidly. And by the 2050s, so there's going to be like this 20-year period where China just ages insanely rapidly. Starting in, I would say 2028. That is when it really starts. But really after this decade. So China's got 1 decade more of relative youth.
Yeah.
I'd say. And I'm sort of scared they're going to use that little interlude to like launch a war. They're going to make, we're going to get old, after this decade, so let's launch a war. So which they could do. But then I guess that's a topic for another podcast. But in terms of Japanification, I think the biggest similarity that I see is banks basically evergreening loans to shitty failed companies. And in this case, the shitty failed companies, a lot of them are local government financing vehicles and some of their state-owned enterprises, other SOEs. But a lot of them are these local government financing vehicles became these like local conglomerates that just put their paws in everything. And they're really inefficient. Like they only survived on like borrowing cheap money. They suck. And like, yet lots of jobs are dependent on them. And so now, in response to the economic slowdown, Xi Jinping just like wants to press the button he used to be able to press, which is banks, lend. Banks, go lend more. And like lend at cheap interest rates. And so, they just cut the reserve requirement ratio, which is like an incentive to lend, right? And do other lending incentives. And so who are they going to lend to? These local banks, like the big national banks they're all lending to like, the people that Xi tells them to lend to, which are electric car companies and battery companies and solar power companies and steel companies and maybe like trailing edge, like foundational chip companies and things like that. And they're just all the government's priorities for industry. But at the local level, these banks are going to lend to local government financing vehicles, which are going to say they're manufacturing stuff, but they're really just going to do crap. They're just, it's economically useless crap. Which, Japan did a lot of this after the bubble burst too. You had companies like, I don't know, Itochu, who would just like do a whole bunch of, they're just like these conglomerates that had gone into every business. Everybody like Itochu would like make like appliances or something. I don't know. Like they would but they wouldn't do it well, right? They just make everything. And then they just take these bank loans and the banks would just sort of evergreen these loans. And then the government would like bail out all the shitty failed companies. And they still do that to some degree. Actually, Japan still like bails out a lot of shitty companies. And this is one reason their productivity is going down. Like they need to stop bailing out shitty companies and let them fail. But that's a story for another day. Anyway, so China, I think, could have this problem with zombies and banks funding zombies, and they could have the problem with aging. And of course, they also have the problem with the overhang of debt, which is going to reduce companies' willingness to take risks and lend to like new innovative kind of stuff. How about now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, sorry. I tried to unplug in, plugging it back in.
You're great.
Yes, I think Japanification could basically be along some broad lines, but all the details will be different.
Right. And before leaving this Japan topic, this is a good book preview. Do you think there is a big policy mistake that they made that could have drastically changed their fortunes if they had done something different in the past couple of decades?
Japan?
Yeah.
Well, I think basically having a policy regime where you let shitty companies die would have been very, very useful. But they would have had to very quickly come up with ways to employ all the unemployed people, like boost mid-career hiring 20 years ago. So they're doing a lot of the things they need to do now. They should have just done them earlier.
Makes sense. I want to go to a question that relates to an article you wrote about immigration. This is from Lucas, and Lucas says, "Hey, Noah, you wrote about how mass immigration can save small Midwestern towns as opposed to actually be a major problem in these towns, as some people believe. That said, how do you reconcile that with deportation being more and more popular? Is it possible that people are acting in their own best interests when preferring deportation? How do you reconcile this?"
Well, I think when you're talking about deportation, the when you poll people, the people they want to mass deport are people who are in the country illegally, right? And if you look at the people who are saving these small towns, they are legal immigrants. I think one problem is that people have in their mind conflated two different things. They've conflated people who are in the country illegally, illegal immigrants, with people who are in the country legally but just don't have a lot of skills. They're just sort of low-wage laborers, right? And when you ask people about mass deportation, nobody's going around asking people about mass deporting legal immigrants. That's not even in the poll questions. It's something Trump and Vance are talking about. You know, they want to try to like revoke people's legal status so they can deport them. But that's not a poll that's being asked. So when you talk about mass deportation, that's mass deportation of legal immigrants is not a thing that any of these polls are asking about. And I think people would say no to that because people, you know, have this idea that legal, on one hand, people have this idea that legal immigrants are good, illegal immigrants are bad. And this is consistent with the desire to enforce rules and laws, right? And on the other hand, I think a lot of the people on the right have begun to stereotype anyone who's sort of just a low-wage laborer as an illegal, when in fact most of those people are here legally. And so that's just sort of the slur, right? It's they started to use the word illegal as kind of a slur for people who just are, you know, are not very rich, right? For immigrants who are just like simple laborers. And so, when the polls ask people about it, they say, do you want to deport illegals? Well, yeah, you've got a few right wingers who, when they say I want to deport illegals, they mean I want to deport anyone who's not white or whatever, or maybe Asian, but like, depending on who you ask. But like those people, that's what they mean, right? When they say I want to deport illegals. But the people who think that way are actually, I think, a minority. There's a relatively small fraction. I think that most people, when they say I want to deport illegals, really just mean if you came illegally, you broke the law, get out of the country. And so right. I think that a lot of people, you know, who are answering these polls are concerned with law and order, but don't stereotype like anyone with dark skin as like an illegal, or anyone with a low wage, let's say, as an illegal. There's what I think is going on.
That makes sense. Good overview. Do you support Balaji's analogy of thinking about immigration into a country the way you might think about hiring at a company, which is you should have a proactive recruiting policy towards getting the best people and people who add value. At the same time, you should also be exclusive in terms of, you know, more just like transparent or rigorous about who is adding value and who is not adding value. And obviously, there are different ways to add value. You need, you need people to do the jobs that Americans don't want to do too. But how do you think about this?
100%. I agree with Balaji. The thing is that, so I think our top priority has got to be skilled immigration. But would you suppose you're hiring for like OpenAI, right? Someone's got to like sweep the floors at OpenAI, right? And do you want to hire like, you want to pay like $5 million a year for like a top AI researcher to like sweep the floor? Like, is that really how you want to use talent? Is that really how you want to use money? No, you wouldn't do that. And so like you need like I don't like the term low skilled. I mean, yeah, it's accurate, I guess, but I don't like it. It just sounds insulting. I don't know, whatever. Let's not be woke though. So low skilled people, like you need those people. You need low skilled people in your economy, right? You need people to mow the lawns and to landscape your hedges and to like do construction work, right? We have all this construction we need to do in America. We need to rebuild America. And of course we hire native born people to do that. That's great. But we all, like in these dying Midwestern towns, you've got like a poultry processing plant, and maybe could your poultry processing plant out in like, bumfuck Iowa, could they raise wages enough to attract a lot of like native born people and make that a good job? Well, maybe. But like these places are paying, I would say, $14 to $18 an hour when you look at how much they pay, right? That's in like a rural area. That's actually a decent wage. Like you're getting paid that to like, process poultry. It's a shitty, dirty job, but like they're not paying like starvation wages, right? It's not like, oh, just raise wages to a livable level. That's a livable level. You can live on like $15 to $18 an hour in rural Iowa. You can. Like you can't live on that in New York City, or you can't live on that in San Francisco, but you can live on that in rural Iowa. But like that's a middle class wage, like $18 an hour, I'd say, is a middle class wage in like a rural area where everything's super cheap. But like But like, who wants to do that? Who wants to live in a small town and like process poultry and like throw a bunch of chicken carcasses around? Like, how are you going to get native born Americans to do that? If you raise the wage to $50 an hour, you could do that, but you can't afford it. Like $50 an hour is more than those jobs produce in terms of economic value, much more. Like you can't raise, like, yes, people would sling around, there's a bunch of people who would sling around carcasses for $50 an hour. They'd be like, yeah, I sling around a carcass, but I'm making good money. Like, but you can't economically do that. Like economically, the amount of production you're doing is not worth $50 an hour. So you lose money, your business goes out of business. And so anyone who's run a business understands this. And so you can't pay much more than like maybe you could raise wages like 20, but you're not going to get native born Americans for 20 to live in a small town. Because it's not just the shittiness of the job, it's the place you have to live. You live in a small town, right? If you're a young person without, who's like, doesn't even have much talent, but you want to I don't know, meet girls or meet guys, right? You want to live in a city where you can go to clubs or do fun stuff, even if you're just a laborer, like a native born person. Who are you going to get to do those jobs? People just like wave their hands and say raise wages. They haven't thought about the numbers involved. Yeah, you can raise wages. These wages are already okay, right? And so compared to the cost of where people are, and people leave in these small towns, right? Like we have this idea that people left these towns because all the jobs left, because the jobs got shifted to China. Well, if that were true, why the hell is there a poultry processing plant hiring these immigrants? That poultry processing plant is still there, and I guarantee that poultry processing plant was not recently built. It's not a startup, okay? That poultry processing plant was not recently built in order to employ immigrants. That poultry processing plant was there before. It wasn't the jobs that left. It was the people who left. That's why these poultry processing plants, these metals factories, and these farms are looking for bodies. They're looking for people to do this work. Those jobs existed, and people moved away from those jobs because they didn't want to live in a little town like slinging chicken carcasses for $18 an hour, right? They wanted to live in, I don't know, Cincinnati. That was the big city. That was the place that they could live. They'd rather live in Cincinnati, or I don't know, Grand Rapids, or Milwaukee, or someplace, I don't know, Philadelphia. Not even New York and San Francisco, but they'd like to live in those places. They don't want to live in like bumfuck Iowa. So, but then these jobs still have to get done, because at the end of the day, you want you're yelling about how much your chicken costs at the store these days, and fucking Biden, inflation, blah blah. You're yelling about how much his chicken costs. Where do you think that comes from? That comes from bumfuck Iowa and some poultry processing plant that no American wants to work at. So they move out. You get someone who's here legally from Ecuador. I don't know. I made that up. No, from Honduras, from wherever. I don't know, Haiti, Somalia. I don't know. You get those people to work at the chicken processing plant. That's a lot better than living in Haiti. I'll tell you that. Making $18 an hour, you're rich. You're making it. You've made it. You and your family are living the dream, slinging carcasses for $18 an hour, picking fruit, doing whatever. That's the American dream, and to you. And so that's what we get. And then you get to have a chicken on the shelf at your store that's not like 5 times as expensive as it was before. And so you're not whining about inflation all day. Everybody's happy except for the people who don't want to live next to a brown person from a foreign country, or a brown person maybe from any country. And so, yeah, so everyone's happy except for the MAGA guys who are just yelling like, get these like inferior third worlders out of my country. But like, you're just like a belly aching jerk who's just like sitting alone at home with how are you providing economic value? But like, I don't know. Are you going on like, you're just like sitting at home like going to like Nude Africa, the website, and then yelling on social media in favor of like right wing stuff. You're useless. All you're doing is bitching about your neighbors and gooning. Like that's all you're doing. That's the value you're providing to America.
That's the
cold open.
Yes, exactly.
Oh God, okay.
All you're doing is gooning. Exactly. Are you basically aligned with Matt Iglesias' 1 billion Americans, or do you think that's missing you're too simplistic?
I'm a moderate on this. I'm a reasonable centrist, and I think we should go for 700 million Americans. I think that is a reasonable target. No need to triple our population, simply double it. And I think that, of course, high-skilled immigration is going to be a part of that, going to be a big part of that. And we should broaden our idea of who's high-skilled from who can cure cancer and whose kids will win the national spelling bee. Yes, we want those people, but there's only a few of them, the super nerds. But then we should broaden our idea of high-skilled to who can work calibrating some instruments at Thermo Fisher, right? Or who can get a degree at Michigan State, whatever. Those people, that's actually a high-skilled, a person who gets a degree at Michigan State is actually high-skilled for an American. So we should broaden our degree of that. And that's going to be a lot of immigration, but there's also people who are simple laborers too. We should take immigration of all kinds legally, of course, right? Letting people in illegally and then making excuses for why they should get to stay here is dumb. That's dumb. That's I know there are a few crusading progressives who think that mobility between countries is a human right and all this bullshit, but it's not. We have a border. Enforce that border, and then let people in legally. And I think that's always been our way before. We've always had immigration that was bifurcated between laborers and smarties, right? We had 100 years ago, we had plenty of smarties coming in. We had your Einsteins, like Einstein, the actual guy, right? Or Tesla, all these smarty people mostly from Europe. Although, and then we had a bunch of people who just worked in meatpacking plants, in Chicago stockyards. And am I sad all those people came? No, I'm not. I'm happy they came. America is not an elite nerd club. We're too big to be that. We're partly that. We need nerds, but we need regular folks too. And so I believe in the Balaji thesis, and I think that we should be recruiting people, but we should be recruiting people of all types, a balance of stuff. You ever read Atlas Shrugged?
Yeah, of course.
I haven't, because too long. I read The Fountainhead, and then basically I get Ayn Rand's ideas.
Yeah.
I have not read Atlas Shrugged. I've read summaries of Atlas Shrugged. It's too long, man, and she's not a good writer. But then what's the plot of Atlas Shrugged is this guy who builds really good trains, right? He's a train entrepreneur, and he's gonna go start his little startup city with all the smart people, right? In Galt's Gulch.
Galt's Gulch, yeah.
And I always wanted to write a story, and I might still write the story, called Hard Times in Galt's Gulch, where basically everyone's arguing about who has to be a janitor. Everyone's arguing about who does the shit work, because there's only smart people there.
Oh, that's funny.
And everyone's kind of a libertarian. And actually Hard Times in Galt's Gulch is based directly on Balaji Srinivasan and our co-op in college, where he would have these flame wars with the people on the listserv about whether he should return his cups to the kitchen. And I was like, God damn, if all you had was a bunch of smart libertarians, they'd all just be arguing about cups in the kitchen. Jesus Christ. You can't have a society like that. Stanford tries, but or you go to the hippie co-ops like Synergy at Stanford, and they have these consensus-based decision-making things. And it's just they'll have this running meeting for 30 hours while you try to convince one very self-important dork to get on board with the consensus policy. And it's just totally unworkable. Man, you need some normies. You need someone to just pick up the one nerd who's just arguing on principle about some stupid, unimportant co-op policy, throw them in the pool, and then have a majority vote.
Yeah,
you need someone to do that. We need low-skilled immigrants to throw nerdy immigrants in the pool.
Hard Times at Galt's Gulch. That sounds like a fun short story.
I need to write that. I need to get my act together.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. If you're building a B2B SaaS app, at some point your customers will start asking for enterprise features like SAML authentication, SCIM provisioning, role-based access control, and audit trails. That's where WorkOS comes in, with easy-to-use and flexible APIs that help you ship enterprise features on day one without slowing down your core product development. Today, Some of the hottest startups in the world are already powered by WorkOS, including ones you probably know, like Perplexity, Vercel, Jasper, and Webflow. WorkOS also provides a generous free tier of up to 1 million monthly active users for user management, making it the perfect authentication and authorization solution for growing companies. It comes standard with rich features like bot protection, MFA, roles and permissions, and more. If you are currently looking to build SSO for your first enterprise customer, you should consider using WorkOS. Integrate in minutes and start shipping enterprise plans today.
Just related topic, is there any saving these Midwest towns? You mentioned immigration as one way to do it, but like if manufacturing comes back, will that go to these kind of sort of Rust Belt cities, or what?
Again, don't think of it in terms of industries, because like if you've got like there's McGregor Metal in Springfield, Ohio, right? This metal factory that employed all these Haitians, right? And they were like, oh, they're great. They show up on time. They don't do drugs. We love the Haitians, said the guy. And then like all the right wingers start sending him death threats, of course. This guy, but you have McGregor Metal. And so like McGregor Metal didn't go to China, man. The jobs were there. It was the people who weren't there. At least people who wouldn't like do drugs and like not show up. Like it was the people who weren't there. It's not about the jobs are there, or the immigrants wouldn't go there. People follow jobs. Like laborers, unskilled people don't just like move into a town and then just sit there collecting welfare. Our welfare state isn't good enough for people to do that. Like you can't really do that. You need a lot of jobs. But we have somewhat of a welfare state. We'll give people something, but mostly for like the wives and kids of the Haitians or Somalis or whoever. It's the jobs are there. That's why the people move there. In fact, almost all of the people moving there, like there's this idea that like the government plunks people down in these towns. Actually, they don't. The government, when you have refugees, like legit actual refugees, the government actually does plunk them down in a place. They stay there for a year and then they all move out to where a job is. They're moving for the jobs. The jobs are there. It's just like some like McGregor Metal was there. Haitians moved to there because those jobs are there, and then to follow the other Haitians who moved there. So like it's not about the jobs leaving, it's about the people leaving. And of course, I had the idea that okay, let's plunk down universities in these areas, because those will provide paper pushing desk jobs at a nice place with like some college kids and whatever, a nice university, and people actually want to live there. And that's based on my hometown of College Station, Texas, right? Everybody from the surrounding towns that wants to leave small Texas towns will move to like a small Texas city. They'll move from a place with like 5,000 people to a place with 50,000 people. Pikeville, Kentucky is a famous example of it. That was my idea. The problem is that like universities are now declining because there's not enough young people to go to the university. And they're in long-term structural decline. Also, they overbuilt and spent too much on administrators and all that stuff. And they're having a little period of difficulty here that will last for 20 years. And tuition's going down. College tuition's going down across America. And so small universities colleges sucks to be you. Should have spent your money a little wiser. Maybe if you weren't a nonprofit, but that's another story. Anyway, we can talk about that later. But no, for-profit universities did worse than nonprofits. They sucked and died. Anyway, so the point is that there's a limited amount of stuff that you can do to revive these small towns, because they're not pleasant places to live unless you are a person who's used to being poor. If you're a person who's used to the poor, life, these towns can be great compared to a poor town in Haiti or Somalia. It's paradise.
Right, but if you get a bunch of poor people in these cities, is that really gonna, elevate their level of living, or is?
Well, I mean, how do you think these towns started? How do you think these towns started off? Like, why do you think that town's there in the first place? Who do you think moved there? Like Springfield, Ohio. Who do you think were the first people to move to Springfield, Ohio?
Well, it wasn't Haitians. I'm just teasing.
Where do you think that came from?
Good question.
People descended from the
Europe.
Mayflower, 12th generation, sober, hardworking, high-educated Protestant types. No, they came from fucking Poland and Italy and like Czechoslovakia or whatever that was called at the time. Bohemia, they called it at the time. They came from the poor ass places of Europe. And then you had all the old stock Protestant guys were sitting in their little mansions on the East Coast in New York, writing all these op-eds about how we shouldn't be letting any of these people into the country. You had Francis Walker, this guy, president of MIT, writing, these are beaten men from beaten races. They have failed in the Darwinian struggle. Why should we let them into our place? It was exactly the same shit. It was like same MAGA bullshit. And like all the people who started Springfield, they were just the Haitians of their day. You can say, well, Haitians are different. They're like, oh, those Europeans, they had potential because they, look at Europe now. It's all rich now, right? So it turns out they were of a race that had the inherent potential to grow rich. But the Haitians do not. Like, look, Haiti's so poor. Haiti, you think Haiti will ever get rich? Blah, blah, blah. Of course they don't have the juice. They don't have the genes. They don't have the blood of the Numenorians, of the great men of Europe who would sit under the trees of old Germany. And that's, I'm quoting Francis Walker, actually. That's, like he talked about sitting under the trees of old Germany and the like in the tribes and like having a little democracy in tribal Germany. And what were the Romans saying about the tribal Germans? They're like, y'all stink. We're, please go away. We don't even want you in our empire. You're so poor and disgusting and stinky. Anyway, but the point is that, like, yes, every time you think that, like, oh, these people, we found the inferior people, we found the people who just don't have the juice. Maybe one day maybe the Haitians don't have the juice. Maybe they really don't. I've met smart Haitians. I've met a bunch of Haitian, like, real estate people and like hedge fund people in New York who are like rich, like much richer than me, sure, and like making it in New York. But maybe there's only a couple of those people. Maybe your average Haitian is just like dumb, genetically dumb. If you're of inferior stock, you have a national IQ of 67, blah, blah, blah. Richard Lynns and Steve Saylor said blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, fine. Maybe you found the inferior people this time. But you never did before. Always before. You said these are the inferior people and they turned out to be just fine after a couple generations. Now you're going to turn around and tell me, oh, okay, those people were actually fine because white. All right. These people are the inferior people. We found the inferior people now. This time it's for real, guys. I really found the inferior people this time. Maybe you're right. Maybe this time, like, transplanting people to a first world country will not turn them into first world people, and they'll bring the third world with them. Maybe we'll see. Maybe you found the countries that can't develop. Maybe you found the countries that will be poor forever, blah, blah, blah. But like the Dominican Republic, right? Look at the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic was a poor place. It was as poor as Haiti. Go back 60 years. It was poor, full of coups, full of gangs, full of all this shit, right? Dominican Republic was so poor that they were conquered by the empire of Haiti. They were a colony of Haiti, right? How much do you have to suck to be a colony of Haiti? And then they kicked him out. They threw him out, and then they did genocide the Haitians as revenge for this. In the Parsley Massacre?
No.
Oh, it was in the 30s, like Dominicans like elected basically fascist, like a Dominican Hitler, and Dominican Hitler was like, "Fuck these Haitians, we'll get them out." Like, fuck these guys, and they're like just kill every Haitian you see. They're like, "Sir, they look just like us." Oh shit. Okay, so Haitians speak French, Dominicans speak Spanish. So what's a word that French speakers can't pronounce? Parsley. Really hard for Francophone people to pronounce Pitahil. So they'd go up to people and they'd be like with a machine gun, they'd be like, "¿Cuál es esto?" And then they'd be like, just machine gun you. You can't say Espedahil, you can't say that. And so they just killed a whole bunch of like Haitians, like French speaking Haitians, and then a whole bunch of people who were like too scared to be able to say like that's parsley. But like they killed tens of thousands of people, and like all the Haitians like fled the country because they're going to be massacred. And to this day, it's a bit of a sore point between these countries. And like, so Dominicans and Haitians hate each other. Like it's the real war. But like, okay, so Dominican Republic, like one of these third world shithole countries 60 years ago. Now it's growing like crazy. It's like the fastest growth rate in the Western Hemisphere. It's like, and they're doing it with manufacturing, export manufacturing. They're making stuff for America. They make electronics for America in the Dominican Republic. And of course, it's so small, you don't hear about this, like made in the Dominican Republic or whatever, right? You don't hear about it, but it's a production base for American companies. And now it's gotten to be like, I think $20,000 of per capita GDP. Like, that's not rich. They're not a developed country yet, but they're zooming up, and like more and more, you just start meeting Dominicans who just like, you know, like they're obvious, they don't feel like they're from a poor country anymore. They don't feel like third worlders, whatever you want to call people. And so then like, actually Dominicans in America make less money than Haitians. Why? Because the Dominican Republic's economy is good. So the people who come here are quite poor and don't have opportunities. Whereas a lot of the like skilled Dominicans are staying in Dominican Republic, right? To build up that economy because there's lots of opportunity there. So you think you finally found the country that can't develop, and then suddenly you see a country like Dominican, and then, you know, in 20 years when Dominican Republic has like $40,000 GDP, and it's like this like nice first world country that everybody like goes to visit, right? It's like as rich as Puerto Rico, and everybody like goes to visit, and there's like, you know, nice clubs in DR that everyone goes to. It's like the new Miami. Like in 20 years, all the Steve Saylors of the world, all the like human biodiversity guys will come up with some deep story about why all along the Dominicans had the genetic juice that it took. They were not actually the beaten men from the beaten races. Those were the Haitians. Those are somebody else. You like, we'll find the sucky people elsewhere. Right. Trinidad gets rich, Barbados gets rich. Like, okay, well, anyway, like, I don't even know what Steve Saylor is going to say. He's going to come up with some special reason why those guys were okay. We're always okay. You know, they were selected as the administrators of the British Empire, and they were the smart people selected from old Africa, and but they're that's special. And anyway, it's just it. You know, like this whole like HBD, scientific racism, whatever you want to call it, stuff. It can't. It can never fail its adherents. It can only be failed, right? It's like the God in the gaps theory. It's like, if there are people who are still poor, we'll say it's because they're genetically dumb.
Right.
You know, if there's people or genetically just maybe problematic in some other way besides dumb. I don't know. It's not always IQ they talk about, but like maybe that. You know, there's like it's God in the gaps, really. It's like the people who are still poor. Like as soon as each country gets rich, they tell some deep story for why it always was worth it.
Right.
It was, you know, and then of course when these countries get richer, their measured IQ goes up because now people are in school all day.
Yeah.
And then the IQ goes up. So like Richard Lynn is the guy who goes and measures the country IQs. It's a very sloppy sort of approximate process. But Ireland IQ, he's like, oh, the dumb Irish, like back in the day in like 1990, I think, he measured the Irish IQ at like 90 or something compared to like the British average of 100. He's like, oh, kind of dumb. Like 90 is about like, that's around like, yeah, that's like not a full standard deviation below the average, but it's like 2/3 of the standard deviation below the average. So that would be like, you're pretty dumb, 90 IQ, right? So then Ireland gets rich. It's richer than Britain. They you know, do a bunch of software stuff and high-tech manufacturing and biopharma stuff. And then like we outsource everything to them. And then like, Irish smart. And then so like in his later, I don't remember when the other one was 20-something, 2010. I don't remember when his other like revised thing was. Suddenly Ireland's IQ is above Britain.
Yeah.
Now the thing is, that's probably real. Like that's probably a real difference on tests because like, you know, the increased wealth in Ireland meant that people went to school for more years. And we know like Stuart Ritchie is an IQ researcher, and he'll tell you that like the effect of education on IQ is huge. On measured IQ is huge. And so, of course, that means all the HBD people, all the you know, those people, they have to invent a new better form of IQ, G. Like they're, oh, well, that doesn't reflect G. But yet, when you're measuring international IQ, you're not measuring G, right? You're measuring whatever IQ is. Oh, you've invented a better IQ, super IQ. Okay, fine. But then the point is that richer countries get higher IQ. And so then oh, but the story they tell is always retroactively grandfather the Irish or the Polish or whoever gets rich. You know, the people they used to tell dumb jokes about, Irish laborers, Polish laborers, they used to tell like, you know, Polish jokes, Irish jokes. Now you grandfather them into the list of people who are always smart from day one. This, you know, deep evolution, blah, 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 from like the Neolithic period made these populations smart, actually. And then, you know, already you can start to see these guys, they talk about how smart Nigerians are. because a bunch of Nigerians are coming over here, and they're starting businesses, doing software engineering, doing like, we hang out with Nigerian people. Like there's a bunch of Nigerians in Silicon Valley. And so they're like, they're beginning to make the story of why the Nigerians are smart. There's the funniest one. There's this guy, Dario Obasanjo. You know this guy? He used to work for Microsoft. He's
No, I don't know.
Twitter guy. Anyway, he's great. I love his Twitter. Dario Obasanjo. And some guy was like, so a lot of these guys have learned that like the smart Nigerians are called Igbo. That's one of the Nigerian ethnicities. They have a reputation for entrepreneurialism. They're the people who tried to rebel against the rest and break away from the rest of Nigeria in the Nigerian Civil War, and they failed, partly because we helped the government quash them. And so someone was saying like, oh, Dario Obasanjo, of course that guy's a smart guy. He's Igbo, which is darkly hilarious because Dario Obasanjo's dad was the guy who crushed the Igbo uprising.
Oh my God.
Dario Obasanjo's dad is Olusegun Obasanjo, the general who crushed the Igbos.
Wow.
The Igbos would be very mad to hear that guy called an Igbo. But like people have these stereotypes. Who are the smarties? Who are the smart people? Like, oh, it's the Jews. And then you meet some like dumb Jewish people and you're like, oh, well, they must be from the dumb branch of Jews. I've met some dumb Jews in my day, like there are some dumbass Jews out there, like, because there's dumbass people of every group, but you're like, oh, those must be from a different group, because people have this inability to think of people as individuals. You're making a distribution, a bell curve, right, of individuals, and yet you're unable to think. Like, you'd think that drawing bell curves of distributions of individual ability all day would make people think in terms of individual ability, but it doesn't. Somehow it makes them think of like group characteristics. And they think of like each race as having like this intrinsic natural racial mean to which everyone will regress to the mean of their race. And the race is the key thing. And that's it's like there's this deep-seated idea of like, this tribe has this characteristics, that tribe has that characteristics, and thinking of like people as fingers of appendages of a group instead of as individuals. Individualist thinking does not come naturally to human beings. It is hard for us to think in terms of individual characteristics. It is easy for us to think in terms of like the purported characteristics of the tribe. Like dwarves love machinery and they love axes and they love beards and they like, speak with Scottish accents and they, like whatever. Whereas elves are very like, refined and kind of haughty and delicate. And we have racial stereotypes for races that we made up. Like if these were real things, you'd have like, like elves running around listening to gangster rap. You'd have some elves, who were like smoking crack or whatever. You'd have, right? And you'd have like orcs getting PhDs, because individuals are individuals and there's like a distribution, right? And we just can't get off this. But like Tolkien shit is fantasy. It's fun because it's not real. Like real people aren't actually elves and dwarves and orcs. Real people are people, like they're human beings are actually a lot more homogeneous as a species than all these HBD guys think. And we're not in Lord of the Rings world. And I love Lord of the Rings, favorite books, best. I'll reread them all the time. I read them when they're 10. They changed my life. I love them. They are fantasy.
Yeah. I feel like you've really established cemented your centrist bona fides on this episode, because we criticize people who want too much immigration. At the same time, we criticized, sort of the Gulch libertarians, and we also criticize the HBD people. So or not criticize, but found the flaws in their various arguments.
Yeah, and you know what works? The thing that works, the sensible center, is called America. Like America has always tried to kick people out who came illegally, even during the time when like all the progressives think we had open borders. We didn't. It was just like immigration enforcement was left to the states, kicking people out all day. Irish people, like they were kicking people out all day. But we've always done that. We always worried about the ideologies of immigrants. At the beginning it was Catholics, right? The papists are coming to take us over. And then it was like also radical revolutionaries from France. Actually, they thought they're going to spread revolutionism and have a second American Revolution in America. Like in the early 1800s, people were saying this. And then we worried about communists, and we worried about papists, and we worried about this and that. We worried about all these ideologies, unions and whatnot. And then we also worried about like this swarm of unqualified, low-skilled laborers polluting our blood. But then we took them because they made a mean kolache. They could, they worked in like the factories and they built America, and they built the railroads and all this stuff. And then, so America is the center. The center is Americanism. Build this country, right? And Balaji's right. Balaji's absolutely right, but we have to realize that our country is a conglomerate.
Yeah.
It is not a little startup, right? We are not a Hong Kong. We're not a Singapore. We are this big country. We're the third biggest country in the world. And, and we should, and we'll stay that way, and we take the best and the brightest, yes, but that's not the only people we take. We take people who want to work hard and go to church or whatever your equivalent, and just like live a good, decent, honest American life, and fill out the population of these, be the salt of the earth, with his expression, the salt of the earth. Bring that back. Yeah. Like Tyler Cowen wrote this book, Average is Over. And I love Tyler, but I'm always going to say like, no, Tyler, average is not over. Average is back, and it's better than exceptional. Average is great. Let us be in praise of the normie, of the average person, of the masses, of the regular middle class people who just work hard and live an honest life and whatever.
Well, I think what he's saying is like comparative advantage on a global scale. Yeah.
I know what Tyler's saying, but yes, yeah, let us recognize the value of normies. And this is especially to y'all tech people in the audience. I'm sure that the disproportionate percentage of our audience. You think AI is going to replace everybody except the smartest people, and you have the like blood of Numenor, and you're the special people who will be the only valuable humans in the world. And that's not going to happen.
Right.
Normies are going to be making your sandwich for a long, long time because robots are made of metal and they're expensive to build.
Yeah.
And so for a long, long time, for the rest of your life, normies will be defining the world. Normie humans will be defining the world in which you live. And it's okay to just be part of a country with the normies. You're not an aristocrat who just like steps around the peasants. Be a normie. And don't, even if you're not a normie, even if you're like, you started a fucking $1 billion ad company, it's okay to sometimes talk to a barista, talk to a janitor, be a human being. That's my advice. Too bad
that's a good note to,
that would be a good one, right?
Good. Yeah. Good note to wrap on. America is centrism, celebration of normies, engage with them. No, this is a great conversation. As always, a pleasure. And until next time.
Econ 102 is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen, In the Arena, The Cognitive Revolution, and more. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review in the App Store. You can keep up with both of our Substacks for written analysis of the topics we cover in the show at noahopinion.substack.com and eriktorenberg.substack.com. Thanks for listening.